Hey, this is John Reed, johnerp.com, jdod.com. I'm honored to have three fellow SAP mentors who I think so highly of. It's almost a little humbling to be amidst these guys' presence. But uh, but Owen's got me relaxed. He's drinking beer on the right-hand side. I think that's legal. What's up? This is Owen Pettiford on the right. How you doing?
Hi. Hi, John.
We got Graham Robinson on the left, who's actually in tomorrow now. He's in Saturday morning. How's Saturday?
Absolutely.
How's Saturday morning?
It's a beautiful Saturday morning in Sydney. We haven't had many of those recently. Not a cloud in the sky looking out the window. And so I'm looking forward to getting this over and done with so I can start my weekend.
Nice. And then we got Ethan Jewett. Welcome.
Hey, John. Hi, guys.
So we're here to talk about Gateway, which sometimes gets buried in the hype around things like HANA, but I think it's an important topic. It connects directly to developer engagement, which is an issue that many of us are passionate about. So I want to just get a sense of where these guys think Gateway is now, talk a little bit about the myths and the hype around it, and maybe what's real as well. So Graham wrote a very influential blog about Gateway a while back, which was kind of a rant, but it provoked a lot of good discussion. So
Most of my blogs are rants.
Yeah, totally. So why don't we begin with you, Owen? I know you participated in the train race because I served on the jury panel, so I got to see your stuff. Can you tell folks who don't know a whole lot about Gateway what you think is behind Gateway from an SAP perspective? Why do they think it's important?
Yeah, well, first off, I'm disappointed we didn't win the train race, John. So obviously those the bribes didn't work.
No. Next year we'll up the ante. I'll send you like a list of tablets that I might be looking for.
Okay, we'll sort something out. So, what's Gateway about? I guess Gateway's had a. If you look back in the history of it, it's been lots of things in lots of different guises. But I guess as it stands today, I see it as a way of, if we exclude the licensing discussion, it's the way of getting SAP to non-SAP developers without them having to know anything about SAP. So you can wrap stuff up in the back end using ABAP skills, and then by the time it gets to the developer, whether they be a PHP developer or a Java developer, they're just consuming something that's in their language. So I think what probably people haven't seen a lot of from Gateway yet are the consumption tool piece of Gateway. So there's the back-end enablement piece, and then there's the consumption tools, and I think that's perhaps part of the magic of Gateway will be if you can get to the point where you can give a PHP developer something that's actually in PHP that does interact with SAP, but they don't really have to understand how it's doing it.
And describe briefly what you did with Gateway with the train race.
So we've done two things with Gateway. We've on the train race we did some interaction between Facebook and SAP, which was using PHP and the Microsoft Odata libraries, and there was some interaction with Google Graphs, and then there was interaction with Microsoft Connect device. So within that couple of days, the developers were able to really get into just developing stuff pretty quickly. And then recently we've just certified an application for Gateway as well. And again, I think we've really seen that. I guess before our OO developers kind of didn't really understand what ABAP was and how it could be used. Whereas we've seen that we've got a couple of ABAP developers and they do their ABAP magic, and then the other guys just get on and develop the way they developed before. So.
And Gateway has its origins around the Microsoft Duet product, which is why the Odata standard has been, I guess it was sort of co-developed with Microsoft, and so that's a key piece of the equation to understand that it wasn't like SAP just built an open tool from scratch, say using JSON, which a lot of the RESTful developers prefer. They took something that was originally around a Duet use case and expanded it, and that's what we're dealing with now, right?
Yeah, I think so. Well, my understanding is the next version is going to have JSON built into it as well. But
right.
I think at the moment it's I don't really like the term, but there must be a better one, and maybe one of these guys can come up with it. Is they talk about this concept of semantic proxies for the OData stuff. So OData is almost like just one of the layers, and then you can I've seen some of these generation tools. So then you get Java classes, or you get PHP functions, or whatever it might be. So actually, you don't even have to understand OData, and that's been one of the. So it's almost, to me, I guess previously when you interacted with SAP, you've had to understand some kind of SAP proprietary standard. And if I understand what the Gateway team are trying to do, it's trying to say, well, actually, can they put layers in place that mean by the time it gets to the developer, they get something in their language to interact with, which is, I guess, it's got to be a good thing.
So let me ask you guys, people have been integrating with SAP backends for a long time. Up there's the beer. That looks good. People have been integrating with SAP backends for a really long time, in a variety of means. So I'm curious to what extent, and you guys agree or disagree around how much Gateway really changes the game around pulling data from backend systems. People have been doing it for a long time. How different is this than what we dealt with in the past? Graham, what do you think?
Well, I think from a technology point of view, I don't see the Gateway technology as being a great leap from what we've already been able to do. As I've blogged and talked about before, I definitely see Gateway as a developer productivity tool. And I see it as an ABAP developer's productivity tool. It's a tool that allows the ABAP developer to expose SAP functionality in a standard way, so that, as Owen mentioned, the developers of other tool sets can just pretty much introspect that data and potentially that metadata as well. So the development tool can introspect it and produce the runtime environment that they're used to consuming, and they can do what they're good at. So I think it's, for me, it's not a quantum leap. It's something that we've always been able to do. But having said that, it takes time and effort to do that sort of stuff. It adds time and cost to your development to, first of all, build the back-end SAP functionality to start with, and then to expose it outside the SAP system using some of these standard web-based techniques, if you like. So for me, I look at what it can do, and I see it first and foremost as a developer productivity tool. But I'm happy to be challenged on that. Happy to have the debate.
No, I'd agree with you, but I do see it as as there's two halves to it, and I think a lot of what people have seen so far is probably is the piece that's the ABAP productivity tool, as in, because that's the bit that you can see and you can download. We haven't seen some of the productivity tools that would make a Java developer more productive in terms of then consuming the OData stuff on the other side. So I think it can be productive. It's definitely a developer productivity tool, and with some of the other I guess ways you could interact with an SAP system today, I haven't seen the same investment from SAP in the consumption tool outside of an SAP standard. Yeah, so they invested a lot in the composition environment, but that was that was their technology, consuming their technology. That they haven't invested so much, in my experience, of doing it into other environments, which they seem.
So, Owen, are those consumption libraries required for SAP? Because SAP is layered on top of OData, right? With Gateway, it's not pure OData. There's more there that SAP has added as its own semantic addition. So, are there new tools required, or can you use existing OData tools?
No, you can use existing OData tools. I think the bits that they've added to the OData standards are extensions. So if you've got an OData tool, and I guess the proof's going to be in the pudding of each individual tool. But I don't think they've broken the standard. They've just extended it for, so that their tools can then, when you're down to UI generation, I think it's stuff like being able to associate fields together, so a value and a currency, or perhaps some more complex data structures than the standard OData standard supports. Yeah. So when they're anyway, I mean, the consumption tools are, I guess, they should be coming soon. I think I've got a session next week to get a preview on some of those tools, and I don't know when they're going to get released, but it's almost that to me will. I don't think anything's a game changer, John. You asked it earlier. I don't think it's. There are now almost so many ways you could interact with SAP that it's. If you go back 5 years, there were too few, and now it's kind of very confusing for customers. So I was with a customer yesterday where they were just like, what do I do? You know, do I do ABAP WebImpro? Do I do Java WebImpro? Do I do Gateway? Should I do SUP? You know, the list sort of is it's not endless, but it's almost too long now.
Mm-hmm. The dreamier gateway advocates that I've talked with talk about how the RESTful approaches of gateway will allow a whole new generation of developers who are not classic SAP developers to start quickly building lightweight. You know, you think about mobile, for example, as one possible application, not necessarily restricted to that. What do you think? Is that hype, or is there something real there? Anyone?
Well, I don't sort of subscribe to the RESTful camp of sort of solves the world's ills. But what I do think is if SAP deliver on this, the vision of, and again, please help me and give me a better name for it, but this idea of semantic proxies. So you've got something you can give to developers, they can point it at an SAP service, and it generates stuff in their language that they can just use off the bat. Then I think that's got to improve the ability of other developers, whether they're C# or PHP or whatever, to be able to say, well, now I can get on and develop against it, because they don't really have to. They then don't have to understand. They don't have to understand OData from what I can see from the thing that I've seen so far. They have to see how they can find an OData service, and to Graham's point, if the ABAPer doesn't understand how to create a decent OData signature, then it all kind of falls apart. But as long as you've got all the pieces in the pie, then which I guess brings us back to the word that's not used a lot around Gateway, the other G word of governance, which was overused when it was in the world of enterprise SOA, and now governance is bad. But I can see Gateway in the hands of a rogue app developer could be a nightmare in terms of what sort of services were created and how that was knitted into the back end, and what that might do when you come to upgrade and stuff. So I think there's some hidden dangers. Mm.
So Graham, let's dig into the controversy a little bit around your blog post, which went up I think last fall. You went on a rant of sorts. What provoked the rant?
I guess for me, a lot of it was around. I actually thought the gateway concept, when I heard about it, probably about 12 months beforehand, was a great idea. It seems to me it was exactly what SAP needed to do, which was to find an easier, simpler way to expose their functionality so that developers could consume it any way they like. So I really early on bought onto the concept of Gateway. I actually thought the fact that they were even going as far as to build wizards to wrap batch input style stuff, so you could in theory go back to 4.6c systems and things like that, was a good selling point. I'm not sure technically that I would lead to do that, but I thought it was good. I thought the whole concept was good. And then suddenly there was a little whisper that they were going to charge for this. And up till then, I really just thought of it as an interface, a tool that I could use to get into stuff. So I was very quick to get back to SAP to say, hey, I think this isn't a good idea. I just I don't think it's good. And then I had some meetings at Sapphire with actually Sanjay Poonen. I brought it up with Sanjay Poonen and said, mate, I just don't think this is a good idea. And he very quickly, as all good senior vice presidents do, pointed me in the direction of the guy that was responsible for licensing, who just happened to be on site. So I had about an hour with this guy, and I said the same things I've been saying since, which is, SAP is an applications company, and you guys have become very successful selling business applications because the business benefit is obvious. You can directly link what you're charging your customers to the business benefit, and this is a piece of technology. And to be quite honest, it's a small piece of technology. And I think I don't think you should charge for the technology. I think you should continue down the road of user-based pricing. And who cares how anyone connects to your system as long as they pay for a user type stuff. So I had this long discussion with them, and they listened to me, to their credit. They listened to what I had to say, but I didn't really see a lot of change in that attitude all the way through. And in fact, I got the feeling the licensing question was getting more confusing, because they started to talk about internal users, external users, named users, unnamed users. So suddenly, instead of even having a simple "this is what it is" type price, it sort of went a bit nuts around there. And I started to feel, I put myself in the role of the gateway developer, the guys on that team that had built that product. And I was thinking, if I was on that team and I'd spent a fair bit of my time building this product that potentially could be of benefit to a whole lot of other developers like me, and suddenly it's getting locked down in this licensing issue, you know, the lawyers have got involved and they're really stopping the uptake and acceptance of my product, I'd be pissed. And so I wanted in some ways to get out there how those guys must be thinking and try and put it in there and say, you know, I think, you know, not only is this whole licensing the technology piece a bad idea, but I wanted to sort of be the voice of those poor developers who had what I thought working on a really cool bit of technology, but it wasn't getting the market traction it needed.
Now, your blog post got a ton of responses. Why do you think people were so affected by what you wrote, and what did you get from the interactions with your commenters around this?
I'm not quite sure why it engaged so rapidly with so many different people. It was interesting. I think I'm a guy that usually says it like I think. So I sort of don't dance around the words too much. I throw it out there. So I think that in some ways draws responses from people. But I think, you know, it touched a nerve, because I think there are a lot of developers out there who wanting a nice, easy way to connect to an SAP system. And what came out for me from that, which I hadn't considered before I wrote the blog post, is there's an awful lot of customers out there who just want certainty about this issue of licensing. Let's call them unnamed users, but they want certainty around connecting the great unwashed of the internet to their back-end data. They want some certainty. They want an answer. They want a clear thing so they can sign a bit of paper, pay a bit of money to SAP, and be comfortable that they can connect all these people to their system without violating the license. And at the moment, there isn't any certainty around that. And so for me, one of the really interesting things that was clarified for me was how important that is, especially to the really, really big SAP customers who see, you know, millions and millions of people executing on, you know, more frequently than on a daily basis, transactions that ultimately might execute in their back-end SAP system. So for me, I was surprised at how important an issue it was for some SAP customers, for a lot of SAP customers.
I want to get into the developer engagement piece, but I'd like to focus on the customer licensing part first. Ethan, you also had this on your mind, because I know there was a recent blog post you were thinking about as well. So how does this discussion tie into your views on just SAP licensing, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, the blog post that I sent out a link to was kind of I think you used the word provocateur or something like that, John.
Yeah.
It was titled "How Not to Sell Software in 2012," and you know, it got at some of the things that SAP definitely does, like not having clear terms around pricing and around licensing, and clearly that's a pain point, I think, for a lot of customers. And to the extent the Gateway actually makes it explicit, even if they're charging for it, that may actually improve the situation, because it's as far as I can tell never been clear for people running a SAP backend system how that legally is handled as far as interfacing with the internet or even a third-party system. Historically, if you've wanted to do that, the third-party vendor needs to work out an agreement with SAP directly, and that's quite expensive, I think. So for large customers that want to do custom interfaces, it would be very helpful if there was something explicit, and whether that's metered pricing or something else, that would be great. But the blog post that I sent a link to, one thing it was getting at was that it needs to be explicit. It needs to be written down on a website somewhere. And this thing that we constantly do, and it sounds like is still happening, where, well, every customer has its terms negotiated individually, is is very difficult, I think. It's very difficult for developers, but I think it's very difficult for customers as well.
Oh, and have you had licensing discussions with your customers around Gateway, or have you had to think about that from your vantage point?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have had licensing discussions around it, and I think the feedback is probably the people understand the usage pricing for the anonymous user. So I guess what Ethan was talking about, the whole that seems to be seen as something that's okay. They like the idea that it's they can reuse the licenses internally when it's a named user. I think there's just some pushback around the usage model for the internal user as well. That just seems to be seen as unfair. But also, it does provoke the conversation of, well, I'd like to go down that path. Playing to Graham's point, I can see the benefits of the platform, but actually I can do some stuff with the standard, with the platform I get with my, just my standard ERP license that's for free, that doesn't incur, these costs. Therefore, I'm not going to go down the path of looking at new software.
Yeah, I guess SAP's concern is that Gateway can open up potential usage by, hundreds of so-called users, so a customer could pay for a handful of licenses and use Gateway to open up to a ton of other people they didn't pay for or whatever. Unfortunately, the downside is that it turns into, I think, Graham, were you describing it as a toll road at one point, or you're paying for the faucet or something, and unfortunately that really seems to go against what SAP was trying to accomplish with Gateway in terms of opening systems up. So it'll be interesting to see if we see progress on that.
Yeah, I think it drives people to think, well, I like what the platform could do, but I can knife and fork a one-off solution myself without doing it that way. So, because I feel you can open up SAP, without that as a tool, if that makes sense. But then you're kind of on off-piste, and then when these consumption tools come in, you can't use those consumption tools. So it's almost like it's the right thing to do. Or in my conversation with the customers, a lot of them are saying they can see it's the right thing to do, but why would they pay money when they can do something short term for free?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a problem for ages, I think. I mean, customers have always been able to do this exact same thing using RFCs or using the SOAP interfaces, and it's not a new problem. And the question is, now that SAP is developing a modern way of managing this interface that's centralized, the question is why start to charge for it for named users that you have already been paid for, when that's all that's going to do is limit adoption, and it's actually going to make the problem worse because customers will not be going through a standardized method of having these users gain access to the system. So I don't see it as a new problem. I do see it as possibly getting in the way of adoption of a really good tool.
I mean, maybe even the problem has been that they're not looking at this as a generic problem, So, whatever,
Absolutely.
Whether it's, Odata today, JSON tomorrow, who knows what in the future, and we had SOAP and we had RFCs. I guess maybe a fairer, if there was a pricing model, should just be, whatever the standard you're interfacing to SAP with, then, these are the rules.
Absolutely, I totally agree, and I think one of the things I tried to make places. Yeah, one of the things I tried to get through in my blog was I felt SAP had taken two problems. One is opening up the system to developers, and the other one is licensing the great masses of users. And they've taken those two separate problems, and they've thought they could come up with a single solution for it. And I, as a developer, don't want it mandated to me that I have to use Gateway as my interface because I'm going to bring in unnamed users to connect to the system. I may find, for a whole lot of reasons, that I want to use a different interface. So I want the licensing in place so that I can use whatever I choose is the best solution for what I'm building.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, let's hit on developer engagement then. Let's start out just with an assumption. Let's just make the assumption for our talk that engaging developers, like smaller shops and individuals, is vitally important to SAP's economic future. Now, not everyone at SAP agrees with that. I can think of some executives who don't. But let's start out with that assumption, especially in terms of cloud and mobility and that type of thing, that the ecosystem play is very important. With that in mind, how would you grade SAP on developer engagement right now with smaller developers, and what, if anything, do you think needs to change?
Are we grading on a curve?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how tough a grader you are, Ethan. I've never asked you to grade anything before.
I mean, look, as far as I can tell, as far as developer engagement goes, the Gateway team has done the best of any team at SAP I've seen that's developing a new product. They've engaged with developers on SCN and through the mentors and other channels early in the development cycle, and well before release, well before beta or ramp up. And the engagement seems to have been genuine, and they took feedback and didn't do everything we told them to do, but that's okay. So I think as far as developer engagement and outreach, they've done a really, really good job. They had a system available online for people to connect to early on, much like the web services playground, and they now have a downloadable version of Gateway that runs in a virtual machine that you can run on Linux or on Windows. That has a 90-day license, and so that's fairly generous as far as SAP goes. So I think it's very positive. It seems like they're at the forefront of SAP culture. That said, SAP culture is not at the forefront of developer relations culture. So there are some real heroes within SAP that do a lot of really great work on developer relations, but oftentimes it seems like they're really fighting to get to where they are. And so there definitely needs to be work done there. All of SAP's competitors offer their software, all of their software basically, for download for unlimited periods of time, and new products are available almost immediately for developers, either for free or for a yearly subscription. So SAP's not there yet.
I had an interesting argument with an unnamed journalist, a journalist who will go unnamed, around that, who pointed out to me how much more transparent SAP was than Oracle, and so I came back and said, yeah, but Oracle makes all its software free for developers, and Oracle's not the only one. I'm not singling Oracle out.
No.
IBM does as well, and I think maybe
Microsoft as well.
Microsoft. And I didn't get a response to that.
Yeah, but SAP is more transparent as far as how their organization works, but they're not transparent as far as getting their software out to developers. Oddly enough, there's definitely a disconnect there.
Well, and I think SAP does get defensive on this topic because, let's face it, they have worked hard with things like Experience HANA, and there's going to be, I think, more action with mobility soon, if I can read the tea leaves correctly, and InnoJams and such are in the train race that Owen participated in. So there's been that kind of jam culture as part of SAP, and SAP's worked hard there. The question becomes taking apps to market and turning it into an app store economy where developers can actually monetize apps that make a difference to customers. Graham, I know you've ventured into that area. Where are we now with that?
Well, we're no further than where we ever were. I mean, if I want to build an app that connects to an SAP backend, and if I don't use Gateway, there is no licensing model unless I have named users. Assuming it's an online connected thing, there is no licensing model. SAP can't handle that. If I want to build an app on an SAP system, there is no concept within SAP, and there's nothing in their price book on a subscription or transaction-based model. So, for example, I've got a personal experience where I've built an application and I wanted to run it on a SAP stack. So I effectively asked them for a single user ABAP license, and my single user was the developer. This application has no user interface, so there's no users connecting to it at runtime. There's nothing happening like that. It's just a stack running that's effectively processing a bit of data. And down here in Australia, the list price for that is getting close to $100,000 Australian just to get that. So I went back to them and said, listen, that's not going to fly with me. My business model is I'm going to charge my customers a small amount per transaction. I'm going to charge them, let's say, 25 cents a transaction. So can we have a discussion around what percentage of that 25 cents you guys get as a licensing thing? And they went away and came back and said, we want $100,000 from you up front. That's the only thing we can do. So I had to go away and do it another way, really. And I'm the really thin edge of the way out there, bottom end of the world. If I was in the South Island of New Zealand, that's probably the only way I'd be further away from head office for SAP. But I think there's going to be more and more people asking for this sort of model going forward if they want to run it on the SAP technology, and SAP want us to. I mean, they're cloud players all for building the platform in the cloud. They want everyone coming to their platform, and they're going to try and put apps on top of that. But they want everyone to come to the platform, and presumably, if everyone comes and builds applications in River or whatever we're going to call it in the cloud, we're going to sign up for so many dollars per user per month, and SAP are going to want a few of those dollars. That's got to be where they're going for that platform. They're just not there yet.
Well, I think it's a philosophical and tactical issue going on in terms of, is this going to be large SAP partners that we're typically used to developing these apps? If so, then SAP has a model for that. If their economic success around this depends on the smaller developer, that's where the issues are. And that's kind of, to me, that's where they need to head, but I don't know that everyone inside of SAP agrees with that. But having said that, Graham, what would you need? What are the pieces you would need to develop apps and take them to market? You would need an app store. You would need free access to tools. Is the subscription revenue, are there any other pieces? Subscription-based revenues is a piece of it. Less overhead. What else do you need?
I guess where they could really help me is if they do go down provide the platform for it. I mean, they could run the platform for me. At the moment I'm going to other people to run the platform. So there's got to be a play there for actually running their platform in their infrastructure, and providing that infrastructure as a service to me, and I in turn provide the applications as a service to my customers. So there's got to be a play there for them and things like that. But one of the other things that gets me about SAP, you just tweaked me then when you mentioned big shops and the small developers, is SAP's definition of a small developer seems to be a small developer is a person who builds small applications for small devices for a small number of people. There are lots of small developers, as in small in organizational size, who aren't building mobile apps. They're building different types of apps, who aren't they're not interested in the latest greatest SAP technology. They're building small applications maybe on technology that's been around for 10 or 15 years, and they're getting a bit lost in the noise as well.
So how do we go forward? Who knows? I guess we keep banging away until someone listens. And there has been some listening.
Yeah, there's certainly listening. Absolutely. And one of the great things about SAP in 2012 compared to SAP in 2005 is they are listening. And they're actively listening, they're actively engaging, and there are more people listening than there used to be. But it's a big aircraft carrier. It's got they've got a lot of baggage. They are unique in some ways as a software organisation, is that they've got so much legacy baggage based upon their culture, and it's right in my mind that they will always support the stuff they released in the early 90s, the first release of R3, the ABAP that runs on that will run on the ABAP stack they release now. That's a remarkable achievement, but that also is a huge legacy for them to bring forward, and makes all this stuff very difficult for them. And I understand the problem, but yeah, on the upside, the SAP now is a quantum leap from the SAP even 6 years ago in terms of listening and actively engaging. But it's it's a tough job, and it's bloody frustrating when you finally get someone who listens and understands the problem. They always roll out, the legal guys won't let us do this. We've got to talk to the legal guys. Well, I don't know who the legal guys are, but someone needs to give them a good boot.
Oh, somebody had to say it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they've had it coming for a while, actually. Now that you bring them into the fore
Yeah,
here.
and the funny thing is, I mean, this technical undertaking they've done to keep backwards compatibility is amazing, but you don't have to do that for legal. um, your license from 10 years ago doesn't necessarily have to be compatible with new licenses that you're writing for customers now. There is potential to move forward there, and sometimes it's frustrating to see that holding things back, as opposed to the technical considerations. So, but
Well, I guess one of the problems they have is nobody with so many customers and so many different deals and 2,500 products on your price list. Tweaking your pricing model could have some significantly unwanted impact. Yeah? So I guess it's just not
But
a simple problem to solve with it.
But we can also flip that around, right, and say that if SAP doesn't tweak its pricing model, that could have some unwanted impacts as well. We're moving to a subscription economy with a lot of software, and SAP is going to have to grapple with that. And I think to some extent they understand that. I mean, that's one reason why they just overpaid, one would argue, or they let's say they paid a healthy amount for a company called SuccessFactors. Several billion and change. So I think
turns out that company was very well named.
Yeah, yeah. So there is a recognition, I think, inside of SAP that subscription-based pricing and the things that go along with that are going to matter going forward. But there's definitely going to be an interesting culture inside of SAP between the big deal chasers and the subscription folks, and we'll see.
Yeah, and I think it's key that we talk about this new subscription-based pricing, but SAP has always been subscription-based pricing, right? What's changing is the implementation times to a large extent. So with these cloud-based tools, implementation times theoretically plummet, and that's what has always guarded the subscription income of SAP and other ERP companies, that it's so expensive to change. And if that's not the case anymore, then they need to win the war for developer skills and for customer mindshare. It has to be easy to be an SAP customer. It has to be easy to be an SAP developer. And Gateway is a step in the right direction technically. That's for sure. But if the licensing model doesn't come along with that, then it doesn't do any good.
Well, and I suppose it's a question of urgency, right? It's a question of, when you hear things about SAP having its best year or best quarter in history or a number of years, that you worry about a certain false confidence, with the market changing as fast as it does, It would be great to see more momentum, and there are some people inside of SAP working really hard on these issues right now. So our goal is not to make them feel bad about what they're doing, but to try to support them from the outside and say, we think this stuff matters. So if you're one of those people and you're getting pissed off at this video right now, we're going at it because we believe
the team's working on this. We're doing a great job, I think. It's a difficult job for them.
We believe in what you're doing, and I know it sometimes feels like we don't thank you enough because we're always saying, but what about this? But why do you have 5 app stores instead of just, 1 or whatever? But we care. we care about it. Can we talk a little bit about the Gateway Sybase Unwired platform connection? Any thoughts on that? Come on.
Apparently not.
Come on, Graham. I know you trash the Sybase Unwired platform in your blog, so I know you have something to say about it.
I don't know what to call it.
Yeah, well, I had trouble knowing what to call it, but
yeah.
that's an ongoing issue with every SAP product. No, the issues in my blog around the Unwired platform were essentially the same licensing issues around, that I was mentioning around Gateway, and I was using Gateway as an example more because it was much smaller and discrete, But again, in terms of the platform, the Unwired platform, I haven't built anything very serious on it, so technically I'm probably not in a position to comment how fantastic technically the platform is or not. I personally think that it won't be that far ahead that we will wonder why we're even talking about mobile platforms. We'll just talk about platforms, and we will assume that any platform can support any client that's available. Okay, and so I think the time for the mobile specific platform is probably, I hope, will be very short. Certainly when I build user interfaces now, and generally they're connected user interfaces, so I'm using technology like the good old server-side scripting, BSP pages, things like that. When I build them now, I build them knowing that my users are going to be using tablets and potentially smartphones and things like that for them, so I build them for that. So that means, for example, I rarely, if ever, build a UI using WebGen Pro ABAP because it can't support those platforms. My expectation is that I hope in a very short period of time, we won't need specific mobile platforms. So for me, I see the unwired platform as a transitional stage to get there from the technology, getting the technology there. That doesn't mean it's not important, and certainly there'll be a lot of apps built on it, and we'll run it that way. But I guess that's my thinking around the unwired platform. And for my customers, I'm a small developer. I build small things for small devices, right? I also do it for small customers. For my customers, anything more than an ABAP stack is an awfully big thing for them to digest. So they resist putting even a Java stack, an SAP Java stack, and the portal and things like that, because for them, they just want a black box in the corner that runs and doesn't give them too much grief. So any other things that we build around that black box business execution engine, if you like, they need a really, really compelling case to put that in there. And I guess one of my messages to them is that I can do a whole lot of stuff without having to put some of those extra things in there. So one of my value to my customers is I go to them and say, yeah, you want that compelling web-based user interface, I can build that for you, and I can build it on the technology you've got without you having to invest in other stuff and things like that, assuming they can get the licensing right.
Guys, thoughts on Graham's points there?
I think I'm not sure I support the fact that there'll be no place for a mobile platform. I think the ability to do more and more things online will grow, but I personally believe there will still be a need for those often disconnected mobile applications. I guess it depends on which country you're in and how good a 3G or 4G network they put in. But I still think that's a pretty specialised use case. Yeah. I think SAP.
I guess what I was trying to say was not that there won't be a need for those sort of applications, but I just think that will be the native DNA of every platform that'll be successful.
Okay. Yeah. And then I think the bringing together of Gateway, so I guess the 25, 26 apps that are out there from SAP, a lot of those are powered by Odata services through Gateway. And I guess for some customers I've spoken to, it makes sense to have that connection into your landscape through a single environment. So I don't think anyone's mandating it has to be there, but I think it's good to see that the connectivity is there, so you can make those things work. And I think there's work going on to make sure that again the kind of consumption tools and stuff like that are going to be cross system. There's probably some way to go with that, but I'm not sure. I was cynical about it to start with. I thought they were just kind of shoehorning it together for the sake of it, but I can kind of see how it gives a kind of neat architectural option if you've decided often disconnected is part of your architecture, and if you've decided it isn't, then you can still use Gateway kind of with or without.
Just to be clear, were you saying that the majority of SAP's unwired platform apps to date use Gateway for back-end connectivity? Is that what you were saying?
The majority of they were kind of the ones that were launched at TechEd.
Okay.
A lot of those are actually driven through OData services and actually work in an often connected way. And then there's they talk about lightweight mobile apps, and it's not heavyweight. They call it something else, but they're kind of things like CRM and field services, things where people are going to be often disconnected.
Yeah.
Somebody help me out. There's a word SAP uses for those, other than expensive.
Non-lightweight.
Maybe not lightweight.
Ethan, were you
I guess that probably plays to Graham's point that a lot of mobile use cases don't need to have that often disconnected capability. But potentially, then I guess although it's not a large number, probably the ones that are going to add value and maybe change the way you work might be the ones that are often disconnected because they let you go and do stuff. So it's sort of it's kind of it's a 6 and 2 3s kind of argument, isn't it? But,
yeah, and I mean,
but I definitely think anything in an SAP world for an SAP customer that means that 2 of the technologies from SAP or 3 or 4 actually work together and interoperate has got to be a good thing, isn't it? Because it means you can buy those 3 or 4 different products and they work together.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing to keep in mind is that Gateway and SUP do different things, right? So, I mean, Gateway is very much an interface technology, and things got a little bit confused, I think, during the ramp up a little because of these pretty cool demo apps that the Gateway team put together. But at root, Gateway is more of an interface and less of an app platform. And SUP is designed to handle all of these issues that we have for current mobile devices. But it's not really designed so much as an interface into SAP systems. So they're doing 2 different jobs, and SUP now can leverage Gateway's capabilities as an interface into the OpOps stack systems. So that's great. It's good. I don't know that they'll combine. I don't know that they should combine.
Right. Well, because you can imagine a lot of situations where offline capabilities are going to be really important, for mobile apps, and that's not Gateway's specialty by any means. But that's a good clarification, Ethan. Thanks.
And I definitely think they shouldn't combine them. From my perspective, make them work together, but don't combine them.
Well, guys, Owen's beer is almost out, and so that to me tells me that our taping session is just about done. That's sort of the sand hourglass.
The sands of the hourglass, yeah.
Yeah, but it did take us 6 weeks to get this organized. So, any final comments for the peeps?
I guess I'd have a question for everyone really, which is what if there was one message back to SAP that they could change about what they're doing with Gateway, what would it be? And you can only have one.
I'd say the developer relations part has been great. Get out of their way. let the team engage. And I think this should be encouraged for all of SAP's teams to give them room to get out there and make their product popular with developers and help them with that. But whatever you do, don't get in the way of that.
Good one.
Yeah, and I guess for me it's the same message. Thumbs up to the Gateway team and the guys that are building this stuff, and thumbs down to the legal guy, whoever he is.
It's easy to be mean to the lawyers when you don't know their names.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, especially after you just signed a NDA to go to DCOM. More jumping through legal hoops. If you guys are sitting down for this one, for me, everyone's sitting, right? I'm gonna say, give it away. Give Gateway away. Give it away to the customers. Give it away to developers. Give it away. And if you're worried about a misbehaving rogue customer, then catch them through some kind of audit trail later and deal with that then. But I think the downside, which is probably the legal downside, is just really hurting the upside. And we all care about the upside, so that's what I'd like to see. I know that's a little radical, but
why not? The first time I've heard it.
Yeah, it's not an original idea. I didn't make that up. That's a good question, Owen. You have any more?
No, but I guess my answer would be that they need to be supplying an app store for the stuff that's developed in Gateway, both the services and the and any UIs as well. They're not supporting the developing community there either. So if you develop if Graham develops a great Odata service that gives access to some funky part of SAP, then he should have a way of monetizing that, and there isn't at the moment.
I'm all for monetizing.
Yeah, it's that journey from I've talked about it, the journey from jam culture to app store culture, right?
Yeah.
And that's really what we want to see next.
That's the flip side of so it's give it away, but give it away, but supply an app store and then take money on the fact that there's a great Graham Odata service that's going to do something funky, and they take a cent every time it's called or something.
I can think of a company or two that's made quite a bit of money sharing revenue on apps.
Can you
think of a few? I think of a few. Maybe it'll work for SAP as well, huh?
Maybe.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
To bold endeavors, guys. Here's to bold endeavors.
Yeah, good. Right. Good night, guys.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate you joining me and staying up late and all that stuff.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
No worries, guys.
Yep.